But we're delighted that you came. Did you have a good time with the classes last night? Was it good? I thought it was a wonderful, wonderful class reunion dinner, and I have to commend, in particular, the class of 1956, who made a special effort on their reunion gift and really came through with a spectacular check. Let that be a challenge to the other classes. They were terrific. So this morning you're going to get to hear from several of our Alumni Award winners. I want to congratulate them first, and I do want to tell you in advance that one of your award winners, Dr. Eastwood, and I unfortunately wound up with the Board of Trustees running head-to-head with this meeting. So we may, in fact, speak and run. But I'm glad that we're going to have the opportunity to hear from him at all. There are two distinguished Alumni Award winners, Helen Hobbs, who's a cardiovascular researcher at UT Southwestern at Dallas, and our very own interim president, Greg Eastwood. There is a winner of the Clifford Vogt Award, and that's Ed Jackson. And there's a winner of the Special Alumni Board Award, who is Richard Hansen. And these folks deserve our congratulations and praise. The Alumni Association clearly thought that they were the top bananas this year, and I'd like to give them a round of applause. And for those of you who don't know him, we have here our interim president, Greg Eastwood, a member of the class of 1966.
I have my classmates here. We let them in. They have passes. I think. Well, my father, who passed away last year at age 94, had a term. He would say, "This is the extinguished award." Because I think he viewed, like many of us, if you stay around long enough, you're going to get these things. But I really appreciate, it doesn't diminish my enthusiasm and gratitude for receiving this award, and I appreciate it very much. Someone suggested that I might want to give a State of the University address. I'm going to forego that, just to say that, first of all, if you're interested in what I had to say about it, it's probably out there in cyberspace. To you in in a letter that I sent to everybody. Subsequent letters are going to be shorter, but this was printed out anyway, about 3 pages. Let me just comment a minute or two about some experiences I've had that I would hope would be translatable, or at least you can relate to them. I was talking with some other people earlier this morning, and also when I addressed some other alumni 2 days ago, about the reason I came to Western Reserve Medical School. I was very much influenced by a surgeon who was in his 4th year of surgical residency in the Detroit area when I was in the 6th grade. He was my Sunday school teacher. And I use this as an example of at least some of us are very susceptible to heroes and mentors and other people influence us a lot in our lives. It did me anyway. So he had gone to Oberlin. A few people who went to Oberlin here. Yes, we were talking earlier. Great school. I somehow didn't think I could go to Oberlin, so I went to Albion College instead. Fine school. But I did come here. I was the first person from Albion to come to Western Reserve. All the other Albion folks who wanted to go into medicine went to Michigan or Wayne State at that time. So in any event, this was one of the things that influenced me, and I knew him my whole life until he died about 10 years ago. And the other thing is that about 10 years ago, I came back for the dedication of the John L. Coy Jr. Center for Medical Education, and that was in October of 1996, and I gave a talk, and Dr. Coy was there. And for those of us who had a direct experience with Dr. Coy, another hero or a mentor or just somebody who influenced our lives immensely, we're in a group that others cannot relate to, unfortunately. And we all have our Coy stories, particularly the ones that relate to when we were accepted to medical school, sort of on the spot. this one person, one-man admissions committee, a marvelous person. But my job that day when I gave that talk was to talk about the relationship of the Western Reserve curriculum, the new curriculum, which now is over 50 years old, and as everyone knows, the new curriculum in this School of Medicine is the Western Reserve II curriculum. It's a marvelous curriculum. But there were a couple of things I said that were the gifts to medical education from Western Reserve School of Medicine. And one of these was clinical experiences are included in the first year of medical school. Who among us can forget family clinic? It was a wonderful thing, at least in retrospect. And I happened to have the experience of eventually taking care of 3 little ones, plus the mother and father, because my, quotes, mother had twins the first time, and then about a year later had another baby. Big job for her and her husband. The other gift to medical, and remember, these are gifts from our school to medical education around the country and, in fact, around the world. I'm not saying that each of these is absolutely unique, but they are identified with the Western Reserve curriculum and influenced to a great deal medical education around the country. Another thing was that course materials from various disciplines are integrated. You know, we take this for granted now, but we had the experience of having everything sorted together in these committees and so on. This is not unique to us, but we were certainly imbued with this notion that the practice of medicine depends on an understanding of science, and that's something that I have tried to carry with me as I've seen patients and so on. And I guess another thing, there were a few other things, but let me skip them, but this notion that the student and the physician are colleagues, we're on the same side of the net, so to speak, and that we're not opposed to each other. I think that's something that we very much experienced as students here, and I've tried to practice as I've gone through my life. Now, at the end of this talk, Dr. Corey was sitting in the front. He was in a wheelchair. He was 92 or something like that. And he listened, and at the end of it, people asked some questions. And finally, somebody said, Dr. Coy, what do you think about this? He said, this is a paraphrase because I didn't write it down at the time. He said, what we did was all well and good, but let's not dwell on it. Let's get on with improving the curriculum and making medical education relevant to today's needs. And here was a guy who, along with others, of course, was the leader of this curriculum and also the leader of the implementation as it related to medical school. And he was basically saying, the past is the past, let's get on. I thought a marvelous statement. Finally, I'll just say something I said a couple days ago. And Marty Broder and I were talking about this earlier. I think most of us, regardless of how we got into medicine, whether we made the decision sort of in our senior year of undergraduate school or as I did when I was in the 6th grade, feel a strong commitment to the profession. Some would even call it a calling. And so that it's not something other, it's something that we incorporate into ourselves and that directs our lives. And of course that relationship that notion as it relates to taking care of patients is very explicit. And you can also see how it applies to doing research and teaching, because those things are just one step maybe removed from benefiting patients. When I became a dean in 1989, I moved to a new city, and so I relinquished my patients where I was. And the writer for the Alumni magazine came by about a week or two after I got there and said, Dr. Eastwood, do you miss seeing patients? And I hadn't even thought about it, I was so busy. And I said, well, you know, actually there's a lot of parallels between being a dean and seeing patients. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that's true. People come into your office, they have problems, they explain it, you gotta listen very carefully, and you have to do something about it. And then I evolved this concept, and probably it's a little defensive in nature, of the practice of academic medicine. And in my view, whenever I was a dean or I was president of a large medical center in Syracuse for about 14 years, I really had the same mindset that I had when I came to medical school here, that I was, fundamentally what I was trying to do was improve the human condition. Now, when I came here as interim president, I got out of the medical environment, but I still carried the same notion. And I don't know how much of this is defensive or just the way I feel about life. But I think those of us who have committed ourselves to medicine cannot uncommit. There's no question about that. Before I leave the podium, there is, on the same subject, I've had the opportunity to welcome new students and their parents and families to medical school for a large number of years. And one thing I always say to them, don't forget the ideals that led you to become a physician. Because I think that if somehow you become hardened, all of us become hardened in some degree, but if you become hardened and you forget those ideals, then you begin to shrivel up and you actually die inside. And I think we know people who have died when they're 40 or 55 or sometime like that. And the people who don't die are the ones who keep alive that flame of interest and commitment to the ideals and the reasons why we became physicians in the first place. Thank you very much for this award. I appreciate it.
Well, now we know why he was the nominee. I have been asked to tell you a little bit about the state of the school, and since we don't have as much opportunity as we'd like to communicate with our alumni, I am going to take the opportunity to tell you just a little bit and to follow on Greg's, the principles and precepts that he's outlined here. Just as the Western Reserve curriculum was innovative and important when it was first established in the 1950s, so I think our Western Reserve II curriculum is going to be a pioneering curriculum and is going to be widely emulated. This is a curriculum that is going to have its first full implementation with the class that is enrolled enrolled this year, the class of 2010. This is a curriculum that is learner-centered rather than teacher-centered and puts tremendous responsibility on the learner to develop his own education and to take responsibility for both his learning and his acquisition of skills for learning. This is a curriculum that has emphasis on scholarship. We're going to require a thesis. This is a curriculum that has threads going through it that will emphasize leadership and civic professionalism. We expect that the physician needs to take back the primacy and the advocacy of the patient-physician relationship. Medicine should not be dictated by the insurance companies or the politicians. It should devolve from the physician-patient relationship. And only by assuming leadership and by having civic professionalism will we actually achieve that goal. Now, I have to tell you that when this curriculum rolled out with the thesis and the emphasis on self-directed learning and the focus on the learner, I thought that we were taking a risk and that the students would, bright young college students might not want to subject themselves to such rigor and to put themselves on the hot seat for their own learning experience. But in actual point of fact, the Phase 2 applications for our class of 2010 were up 50%, when the national average increase was about 5%. And I got to tell you that these folks are fantastic. You would be proud to have them in your tradition. And some of them are with us today. You'll talk to them and you'll see that they're not only very bright and very capable and very intellectually competent, but they all have individual talents and skills that go beyond their intellectual achievements. So I think the curriculum is going to follow in the proud Western Reserve tradition, and I think you're going to be proud of these young people. I think you're going to be proud to say that you went to Case Western Reserve University and you pioneered you know, innovative curricula, and now they've gone you one better, and your traditional, your intellectual children are going to make you proud. So the curriculum, I think, is going to be a real asset to us. I spent most of my career in research, and I have to tell you that the research activities at on this campus are really spectacular these days. We've spent the last 5 years building a lot of infrastructure for research, and boy, is it paying off. We spent a lot of time and effort creating the Cleveland Center for Structural Biology. Seems very esoteric. X-ray crystallography, NMR, 900 megahertz NMR spectrometers. You know, what does that have to do with medicine? Well, now that the patent's been filed, I can tell you one of the things that it has to do with medicine. One of our investigators has been studying the detailed structure of insulin, a small protein. One of the problems with insulin is that as it sits around in solution, it aggregates. That's why you have to keep it in the fridge. It's delicate. If you have it in a pump, you know, you got to change the insulin in the pump on a regular basis. It sits next to your body. It's warm. This guy figured out structurally why insulin aggregates. But he was able to go a step further. From his information on the structure of amino acids, he was able to remake the insulin so that it doesn't aggregate, and it still works like insulin. So he's got this stuff sitting up in his lab for, I guess, a year now. Still works. It's still not aggregated. It's been sitting at room temperature. So think about that for a little bit. How would you like, you know, and if you're a diabetic and you're traveling, you don't have to have a cooler with you or find a refrigerator when you first arrive at the hotel. Your pump is going to be effective for a longer period of time. But think about, too, the third world. Does this open possibilities of treatment of patients who simply have not had the access to the infrastructure, who will now be able to be treated? So this is really, you know, a tremendous advance from what seems like a pretty esoteric core facility that's going to have real benefit not only in the United States and in medicine for our own patients, but also, I think, around the world. This is pretty cool. We've recruited a new chair of pharmacology who, in the space of a morning, can make blind mice see. Our cancer biologists have now got several screening tests that might allow us to detect colon cancer early without the, shall we say, conventional methodology of every 5 years a colonoscopy. Wouldn't it be nice to give your blood rather than... I think that'd be a plus. You know, and in addition, there are other screening tools that are coming down the pike. There are all kinds of genetic discoveries, and the implications of discovering what genes seem to matter or influence the course of some diseases opens new vistas for therapeutics. We have a stem cell center here where there are more than 40 clinical trials operational, including a stem cell trial for cardiovascular disease and the start of an IND to look at stem cells for neurodegenerative diseases. This is all very, very exciting stuff. You know, stay tuned. We're going to make you proud on the research side, too. And I also want to tell you that the clinical aspects of medicine are opening up in Cleveland. Our students now can take rotations at any of the major hospitals in town. You can rotate at Metro, you can rotate at UH, you can rotate at the Cleveland Clinic. This is true not only for the university program students, but also for the 32 students enrolled in the novel Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine, which is a problem-based learning curriculum, and which is a 5-year curriculum, and which is directed at training clinical researchers. So all those students enter the same clinical rotations and can avail themselves of the tremendous clinical opportunities all over town. And this is the first time we've really been able to open up the entire city to any student, to any of our students. So it's a pretty spectacular time and a pretty spectacular opportunity, both for our researchers and for our students and for our faculty. Now, lest you think everything is rosy, it's not. in the face of all of this opportunity and the research and the education and the clinical aspects have never been better. Our finances have never been worse. And we depend upon things like the wonderful reunion gift to the class of 1956 to keep ourselves at the forefront. We're now 12th in the country for NIH funding. You know, think about that. You know, this is this medical center with only about 1,100 faculty is up there within striking distance of the Johns Hopkinses and the Penns with 3 times the faculty. This is a pretty nice achievement, but it takes a lot to stay there, and it takes a lot to remain at the cutting edge. So we're very grateful for your coming back. We hope you'll stay in contact with us. We hope you'll learn more about what we do here, and we hope you have a wonderful time at Reunion. You've picked some wonderful award winners for your Alumni Awards, and I think it's just been a terrific weekend, and I'm just sorry that the Board of Trustees picked this weekend at the same time, and I couldn't spend more time with the classes, talking with you and hearing the nice programs that have been arranged for you. But because it's the Board of Trustees and because I'm a brand new interim dean and I have to make a good impression, and I have to sit in the back and sit up straight and pay attention, I do need to go over to the Board of Trustees. So I'm going to turn this over to Marty Broder and Fred Magaline, who will conduct the rest of the program. But I will take a couple of minutes for questions if you'd like to ask any. Yes?
Is the characteristic of the student body changed in terms of the kinds of kids that are being in the schools, where they come from, what their goals are?
Yes, sir. Actually, Marty, a couple of years ago, the Ohio quota was removed, and fortunately, Dean Horwitz was able to do this without the loss of the state support dollars. So it used to be that we had to have a certain percentage of our class from Ohio. Now it's a much more national class, so it's a much more national medical school as opposed to a regional medical school. I do think the academic achievements of the class has gone up over the last 5 years. If you want to just look at board scores and grade point average. But I don't really think that that's the measure of a class. I think that, you know, we continue to attract students with unique skills and unusual backgrounds. Now, one thing I think that we have become a little bit deficient in is I think we're not as good at getting folks from disadvantaged backgrounds. And I think that part of that problem is that our scholarship money is falling behind relative to our peers. So we share data with a 13 medical school consortium on students and student characteristics and scholarship money. We are 12th among those 13 in our ability to provide scholarship money. So what that does is it cuts into our ability to compete for the very best disadvantaged students, because if you got a great student and they get offered, you know, $10,000 a year more somewhere else, you know, that's going to be a powerful incentive to go to the other school. So I don't think we've done quite as well there as we have in the past, and it's really one of our priorities. Yeah.
I'm in the class of 66. Yeah, in the class of, well, I could do what others have done. 66. When I was here, they told us, you know, for every $1,000 you pay in tuition, there's an X number thousand put up by somebody else somewhere else. So on the days I got discouraged, I reminded myself of that. And it also has guided some of the donating I've done to keep in mind. Currently, for the students, when they pay in $1,000, how many other thousands are behind that 1,000? Do you have that number? And if not, I think it's something worth touting, because it keeps in perspective that, hey, you know, a lot of people made this possible. This is what I kept telling myself on those blue days, you know. A lot of people invested in me, you know, get your butt going, and so I would, and here I am. And I just wondered what the current ratio is.
You know, I haven't calculated that recently, but the number that we've used over the last few years is that tuition actually only covers about a third to a quarter of the actual cost of education, as astronomical as the tuition is and seems, and you know, it's a lot of money. But it only covers, I believe, about a third to a quarter of the cost of education. But you're right, we should do another, you know, formal analysis and see what that is. Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that CASE is 12th in NIH funds, and I wonder, does that include the Cleveland Clinic?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay.
It includes the funds from the Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals of Cleveland, Metro, and the basic scientists. So that's really a Cleveland-wide biomedical community.
And what's the actual number?
Ooh. Roughly 270 million total. Yes, sir.
Do you have any idea what the percentage of donors from the alumni is?
Well, we heard, I don't know about the medical alumni. I heard yesterday at the Board of Trustees that it's about 13% of alumni actually donate. No, we need, that's why I need you, if you will, to go out and spread the good word. I think that, you know, people need to know what we do, and people need to know that their school is alive and kicking and really making progress and has huge forward momentum. Help us out. That would, pardon me? So Lisa tells me that we're closer to 19%, but we're less than other academic medical centers and medical schools. Ed?
Pam, with this group here, I think it's appropriate to say that in this coming year, we're going to go back, hopefully, to some of the things we've done in the past relative to alumni fundraising. And for the folks and the loyal folks here, we're going to be calling upon you to do some of the telephoning to your own classmates. And I don't doubt that we're going to get an excellent response.
Great, that's terrific. Yeah.
This is just a comment in response to what you said. Both my wife and I have been involved in raising money for our undergraduate school, and I think we may have called here. We found out that doctors are really pretty poor givers. There are some people that may donate well, but there are an awful lot that say, oh my God, I've got taxes and my kids are going to college, and so really was not impressed by the donations, the number of doctors that donate, at least to undergraduate school.
Well, I'll tell you that CASE has always had the maverick doctors. Let's hope we have some maverick doctors on this end, too. I can't quote you exactly, but it's about $38,000.
One of the things Joe Namath said, which has really stuck with me as I've gotten older, there's no luggage racks on a hearse, and you might as well see what you're doing.
Yeah, you might as well see the virtues of what you do. And, you know, if you want to send insulin to the third world, if you want blind people with Leber congenital amaurosis to see, if you want these students to turn out and make you proud and change the face of medicine, help us out. Thank you so much and have a great day.
It's my pleasure right now, on a very personal level, to introduce Ed Jackson. Ed is in the class of '66, which is very well represented here today. Thank you very much. And Ed is the recipient of the Clifford Vogt MD 34, class of 34 Alumni Service Award. I don't want Ed's head to get too big, but let me tell you just a little bit about him before he comes up and shares some thoughts with us. Ed apparently wanted to become a doctor from age 8. That's an interesting phenomenon all by itself. He wasn't sure how he was going to get there, but he knew that he was going to do that. He worked very hard to get to where he is. Ed serves now as the Chief of Staff Emeritus and the Senior Advisor to the President and CEO of University Hospitals right across the courtyard. He was appointed Senior Advisor to the President after being Special Advisor to the President and CEO. He was Chief of Staff at UH from 1997 to 2000, Senior VP for Clinical Affairs, and he has been a Clinical Professor of Medicine here since 1986. Ed is one of those students that did both his undergraduate and graduate work here at the university. I'm particularly proud to tell you that he was a resident at Metro, a place that I have very strong feelings about. He was chief resident, and at that time I was a rookie member of the junior faculty and had the great pleasure of helping Ed along with his medical education. He's a fellow of the American College of Physicians. He's board certified. I don't want his head to get too big, but he also has been recognized by the Institute of Medicine. He's also been involved with national healthcare issues. He's been on the Committee of Underrepresented Minorities and the Clinical Practice Committee of the American College of Physicians. He served on the Board of Directors of the American Board of Internal Medicine. And those of us that have the ABIM certificate hanging on our walls might have Ed's name on it. He was recognized by University Hospitals because of his contributions, and they have now made an Edgar Jackson Endowed Chair in his honor. So Ed's going to come up here and tell us a little bit about his life in medicine. Ed Jackson.
Good morning. Such wonderful memories, and what a great weekend this has been. 2 days ago, I talked a little bit about how I got into the interest of pursuing a career in medicine, and then a little bit about some difficulties I had as I transitioned from a small town in the South to Cleveland when I was 13 years old. The point I think I wanted to make that day, the point I'd like to make today at least, is that it is so important to have models who look like you around, whether it's female, minority, or whatever, because that is really what allowed me to really understand that my passion, my calling, was to be a doctor the moment I saw my first African-American doctor when I was 8 years old, and I thought I wanted to be just like him. So today I wanted to talk more about my days at Case and what happened subsequent to Case. We all have core stories, as Dr. Eastwood said. My core story is a very interesting one. Jack was an extremely gifted psychologist. He understood what button to push, I think, for each one of us. He knew how to select people very carefully, and he looked a little bit at your credentials, but he looked mostly, I think, at your character and what he saw in us. And then he knew the buttons to push. The button he pushed for me is he told me, Ed Jackson, I'm going to admit you to this medical school, but there's no way you can successfully compete with the best and the brightest from the Eastern colleges, from Harvard and from Yale. You know, you grew up in an inner city area, man. You can never do it. And that was exactly what I needed to get me wired to work my tail off through med school. But Jack was a master at that. He, however, reassured me that I was vindicated when he allowed me to work for him as his first assistant back in 1971. He would not allow anyone else to help him with admissions until he told Dean Robbins, yeah, I'll take Ed Jackson, he can help out. So he sort of vindicated himself with me then. The other big guy in my career, and Marty probably has the same feelings, was Charlie Ramelkamp at Metro. Ramel was just such a great guy. He called us all birds, the guys that he liked. If we worked with him for a while, we became his birds, and he would do anything for you. And I remember when I came to medical school, on my admission essay, I wrote, my goal is to eliminate the difference in health care between the rich and the poor. And I had that same goal when I went to Metro as an intern and a resident and then chief resident. And finally, Ramel invited me to join the faculty. And I told him always about this dream. And he said, well, Ed, you can dream all you want, but you got to get tools if you want to change the universe. And you have to understand how to change and then how to measure your change. So he sent me off to the University of Minnesota every summer. Typical Ramel. He said, I want you to become the world's authority on health care for the poor, if that's what you want to do. He sent me off to the University of Minnesota every summer for 6 weeks to grad school. Sent me to Great Britain, Scotland, to look at the health systems in the world. And it's amazing how he could just prod you, guide you, support you, lead you, and made a huge difference in my career. I remember one example particularly. I was running the medical area, the emergency room at Metro, and the medical clinics. And I told Ramel that, we've got to change processes in the emergency department so that people who are waiting for care are happier, to understand that we value them and respect them and so forth. He said, Ed, if you're looking for happy patients, I would suggest you get a fifth of whiskey and set it out in the waiting room. He said, I think you got to be more substantive than that if you want to make a difference. It's that kind of mentoring that made such a great difference in my career. Last night reminded me, though, of what really is so special to me about our medical school. Seeing my classmates from around the nation, having met 44 years ago, having some of us last seen each other maybe 10, 15 years ago and still feeling very warm and rekindled those warm feelings when we saw each other last evening. Reminded me of when I entered medical school in 1962. At that time, our nation was in upheaval over civil rights issues. Martin Luther King Jr. was just beginning to be very successful in marching in Montgomery and other parts of our country. And I walked into medical school, the only black student in my class, having been told by Jack Coy there's no way I could compete. I mean, he wired me real good. And what I found was the best community of people I have ever known. And that continues until today. It's hard for me to talk about it without getting choked up. But my classmates are just the greatest people in the world. They embraced me, they nurtured me, they worked with me, and they still do from around the nation. And the greatest privilege I've ever had in my life, aside from my marriage and the birth of my children, is my medical school class. So I say that, too, for the young students I see. Enjoy these 4 years, the best years of my life, though they were very hard, they're still the very best. The relationships that were formed is really what it's been all about, and that's what I really value today. And I am so honored to be thought of sufficient to receive the Clifford Vogt Award, a great doctor who cared for his patients, cared enough to help form the Alumni Association for the future generations of physicians to get support. And I'm so grateful for this award. I thank you so much for your attention.
Good morning. I'm Fred Magdalene from Akron, class of '61. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce to you the recipient of the Special Alumni Board Service Award, which is presented to an individual who has made an outstanding contribution to medicine. It's not given every year, but only when they find someone who meets the criteria. And this morning, Dr. Richard Hansen is the recipient, or not this morning, this evening he will get it, but we're going to introduce him this morning. He, unfortunately, I don't have a personal relationship with him as Marty did with Ed. I wish I did after reading his bio. He's certainly got an impressive, has impressive academic credentials. I could go through this 2-page bio and list everything that he's done, but I think you'd probably rather hear him than me. I'm just going to hit some of the high points. He is, at present, the Leonard and Jean Skeggs Professor of Biochemistry and Nutrition at the university, in addition to holding other jobs both at the medical school, dental school, and at the Cleveland Clinic. He has many, many hats that he wears. He comes to us from, after getting his undergraduate education at Northeastern University, and then he got his PhD at Brown University. And he's got, as I said, a two-page bio here. But I think that this morning he's going to just talk to us a little bit and about his accomplishments, and hopefully this evening you'll all be there to see him receive this award in person. So without further ado, Dr. Richard Hansen.
Well, let me say thank you very much for your kind introduction. And to whoever the committee was that selected me for the award, I'm really greatly honored. And to be on the same platform with Ed Jackson is really great for me. As you've heard, I'm a professor of biochemistry. I came to Case Western Reserve in 1978 to become chairman of the department. I was a 43-year-old professor, a young person. I came to the institution. I'm trying to think back at why I came. I came because I only went to Cleveland once, but I really came because of the quality of the faculty here. I knew two people here, the great Harlan Wood, who I know many of you know, and Merton Utter. And they both worked in an area of research that I knew very well. And it was an influence on me to come here then. And so I could say it was the faculty that drew me. When I got here, the dean at the time was Fred Robbins. And that name says it all. Fred was really a wonderful and great individual. And Fred hired me, and I remember coming here. It was a time we were in great transition here, the late 70s. The institution had a number of chairs who had been here a long time and who were turning over and were retiring, and we were rebuilding basic science departments, which was a very important thing for us to do. And I can remember when I came, I felt the great imperative, because biochemistry at the time was a very strong department, to be involved in this effort of rebuilding the school and working hard to help recruit to Cleveland leadership that would be so important in the future. And I can remember sitting in the west wing of the medical school, which is now the Wood Building. And you may remember those days. There were air conditioners sticking out of the windows, and the windows themselves weren't in good shape. And I remember sitting in the office of one of the faculty who were interviewing me, and we looked, and the wind was blowing in through the window. And he said to me, he looked at me, and he said to me, "Why would you want to come here?" And I remember that to this day. I had a feeling about the institution. I just reflect what Ed said. I had a feeling about the institute. It was something about it that drew me here. And I like to reflect on what it really was that I really thought was such a wonderful place to be, and still do. Because I have to say that in my career, being here has been the greatest single factor. I must say, I love the institution, and I've tried to work hard to help it in every way that I personally can. And of course, it's done wonders for me. So like everything else in life, like a good marriage, it's a two-way street. When I came, I remember, just to reflect on the teaching, what really impressed me here were the number of doctors who taught. I couldn't get over the fact that there were so many physicians teaching in the first 2 years of the medical school, where I had come from Temple School of Medicine in Philadelphia. PhD scientists taught their basic science, and you never saw a physician teaching. But in fact, here, I was very impressed with the fact that doctors were actually teaching basic science. And I quickly realized when I came here that although we had a committee teaching system, biochemistry was my responsibility. I was chairman of the department, and if it wasn't done well, it didn't matter that it was a committee called cell biology. They would come to the chair of the biochemistry department and say, something is wrong, we have to improve it. I remember my first summer here being out on Lake Erie with Dave Goldthwaite, who many of you know, on his boat, and Mo Dixon's son, who was in the first year of the curriculum, was sailing along with us, and he was complaining about, he didn't like the way the curriculum was, the way we were teaching at the time. And I realized at the time that I couldn't escape it. If it was bad, it was my fault. I couldn't say it was the dean or blame somebody else. I had to be there. And I think it's very important, and Ed touched on this, that you have to not only talk the talk, you have to walk the walk when it comes to this kind of thing. And I started to sit through the medical school class, and I realized how important it was for us to be there with the students. And from that time on, I sat through every single lecture of every class. Biochemistry was taught for a month. I'm sure have students who remember this, was taught for a month. I sat through everything, and my feeling was that if the students were going to suffer, so was I. If there were mistakes made, I would be there to see it. If we were going to do something, it was important that I be there. And after all, I couldn't ask my faculty to do this if I didn't myself. And I think that's a general principle that we'd all like to adhere to. Don't say you're going to do it unless you do it yourself. And I found that to be a very important lesson in life here. And it was good to be with the students. We have an unusual group of students here. Ed reflected on that out of his own personal experience. I didn't graduate from a class here, but I've been with the students for 28 years, and it was a great honor to be with them. I mean, it's really, I hadn't realized that quite, because when I came from Temple, I was greatly sort of entrenched in my research career. I hadn't realized exactly what it meant to be a real university professor, to be with the students, and how influential that can be in their future. And what a trail that this leaves behind, and how impressed they are. You heard Ed talk about his feelings. And I know when you think back at the place, you don't think back at deans or administration or anything. It's the faculty you think. It's not the buildings. It's the people who taught you. And it's something I realize now, how important that is, to be a model for the students. And it's, of course, we're torn in academic life. We're promoted not because we're good teachers. We're promoted because we're good researchers. We get tenure at an institution like this because our research is good. Today, if you don't get 2 NIH grants, you ain't got it. And so it's extremely important paradigm that we keep our teaching strong and that we dedicate ourselves to our students and to their careers. When I came, another thing impressed me, and that was how lean the power structure was here. I hadn't seen this before. I came from a school where there was a president of the university, there was a vice president for health affairs, there was a dean, and there was someone under this dean, and then there were chairs. And if you were a faculty member, you had no chance to influence very much. You were a cog in a wheel. Things were passed down this high hierarchy to you, and you were supposed to do it. Of course, you felt completely divorced from the leadership. But that wasn't the way it was here, and I could see that right away. There was Fred Robbins. He was the dean. He'd wander the halls talking to us. He was one of us. He talked our language. He was a Nobel laureate. He was a Nobel laureate, but he had soul. I had never seen that before. Here was a distinguished man, right? Am I true? Here was a distinguished man of the highest caliber who acted like he was one of us. And that was a lesson. He didn't have to say a word more than that. Just the way he acted, you understood it. I have to say, he was a great, great man, and I was influenced by him very, very much in the way you act in your life. And I thought that Fred gave a lesson in leadership to all of us. I think he had a goal. You know, I read a book, when I came here, I read a book by McGregor Burns called Leadership. I don't know if you've ever looked at this. It was in the late 70s. And he made a statement in that book, which I tried to put to mind. And Fred reminded me of this. And that is that great leaders relate themselves to the aspirations of those they lead. And what they do as they lead is not to issue edicts from above, but to identify what is noble among those they lead and to try and cultivate it, to get ahead of it, and to try and bring people together in this. And that's what Fred did. And I think this was a remarkable, remarkable man. I felt immediately that you could make a difference. And this, I'll tell you, makes the world of difference in the way you feel about an institution. I had an opportunity to help do lots of different things at the institution. And I don't think I'm speaking out of school here, that I had an influence on the institution. I don't think I could have worked at another school where I could have had such an influence. Let me tell you what I mean. When I came as chairman of the Department of Biochemistry, I was expected to help build other departments. And it seemed to me that I didn't want one great department, biochemistry, and 7 or 8 minor departments. Just like I don't want to be an institution where I'm the smartest. That would be a very bad institution. You want to surround yourself with people who are better than you are, and the institution won't prosper. And in the final analysis, my career, I realized, was linked to the school. If Case Western Reserve Medical School was mediocre, what chance do we ever have to develop ourselves? It's very important that the institution rise. So it seemed to me that building the school was an important element in my job as a chairman, not to build biochemistry, although that was important, and I had to do that, help do that, but to work for the institution's good. And I chaired a number of search groups. I can remember when I first came, someone came to me and said, the physiology department at that time hadn't been rebuilt, and George Sayers had just left the institution. And they said, well, why don't we fold physiology into biochemistry? We'll have a department called physiological biochemistry or something. And I thought to myself, this is not a good idea. Physiology is a key and core discipline that deserves to be built in and of itself. And so, in fact, if you look what's happened, we have built departments throughout. And one of the things that Fred Robbins did, which turned out to be, I think, quite a remarkable asset for the medical school, he set up a research committee. This is typical of Fred. At the beginning, the research committee was appointed by him, and I was the chair of it. And we had 5 or so faculty that were executives appointments by Fred. About that time, the institutions put together bylaws, and the bylaws said that we had to have a research committee of the faculty. So what we did is fuse the two together. And so we had half appointed and half elected. This research committee, I think, went on I was chair for 20 years, probably too long, but what was remarkable about it, and what I really appreciated, was the dean listened to us. We had the ear of the dean. He listened to us because we didn't have an agenda. We weren't parochial, and we were out to try and build the institution, which seemed to me to be the goal. And a lot of initiatives came. This building we're in, the research committee was instrumental in. The departments of genetics and neuroscience, we were very strong in pushing. A number of initiatives that you can see here in the institution came out of the research committee. And it taught me a lesson, I think, also that when people work together for a common goal, and where our leaders see that they have the institution in mind, it's always easier to get things done in the place. And I really was impressed with it. And Fred listened to us, as did subsequent deans. I've worked under some great people as a chairman, and I've watched our deans come and go. They're very important, obviously, in leading the institution. But I think it's the faculty that really is the key to it. Teaching requires us. We are the key to all of this. And I think if we do anything to weaken this, to weaken what I consider the great environment here, we have a culture here. And this culture is what you've come here for. You didn't come here because we got a new building. You came because you respect the culture of your educational system, of the faculty who are here. And I think no matter what happens, no matter what crisis we have of money or whatever, in the final analysis, the most precious thing we have is the commitment of faculty who spend their whole lives here, for whom this is not a way station for some better job somewhere else, which you often see. We're not free agents here. This is not, I stay here because I want to stay here, not because I have to. I was inspired that Harlan Wood, at 80 years old, was still in our department. He was still working strong. The idea to have a continuum, a cross-generation of faculty committed to Case Western Reserve seems to me to be the highest aspiration that I can have in my career. To be here for our students, to help the institution. There's nothing I think more noble that I can do. My research career is important to me. But as I look back at this, being a part of this culture, keeping it as best I can for the next generation. It's much like a good man's life, I think. It's those small things that you don't notice, those little kindnesses, the type of things that you don't even go unnoticed, that build the culture and make an institution. So it's an honor for me to get this award today. I must say I didn't expect it, and I'm very, of course, honored to be asked. And I think as we reflect on this institution has something special. We're not Harvard, we're not Yale, we're not Stanford, and we shouldn't be. We're Case Western Reserve, and I wouldn't want it any other way. So thank you all very much, and I appreciate your listening to me this morning, and it's an honor for me to be with you today. Thank you.